When billionaire Victor Hayes mocked the maid's daughter with a cruel bet, he thought he was making a joke, but her answer shattered every assumption he held. In a world where wealth speaks louder than truth, one woman's brilliance and quiet fire will challenge an empire. What happens when the underestimated becomes unstoppable? The rain lashed against the glass walls of the Hayes Corporation skyscraper, streaks of water distorting the glittering city lights below. Inside the 52nd floor executive office, Victor Hayes leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a glass of scotch in one hand and staring down at the documents scattered across his sleek marble desk. His voice was cold and clipped as he spoke into the phone. "No, I don't care how many languages a contract needs to be translated into. Just get done by tomorrow or I'll find someone who can." The person on the other end stammered a response before Victor slammed the phone down. "Idiots," he muttered, rubbing his temple. "I pay them millions, and none of them could even handle a simple task." Just then, the office door creaked open. Grace, his longtime housekeeper, stood hesitantly at the threshold, holding a silver tray with his dinner. Behind her trailed her 25-year-old daughter, Aisha, in a plain uniform and sneakers. Victor barely glanced at them. "Leave it on the table," he said curtly. Grace set the tray down and gave her daughter a small nod before retreating. But Aisha lingered by the doorframe, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Victor finally looked up, his stormy gray eyes narrowing. "Something you need, Miss Carter?" he asked, his tone heavy with irritation. Aisha swallowed hard. "Mother asked me to bring up the extra linens later. She said the guest rooms are—" "Fine," Victor interrupted, waving her off. "Don't waste my time with housekeeping matters." As she turned to leave, her eyes flicked to the papers on his desk. The dense, multi-page legal contract written entirely in German. Without thinking, she spoke. "You're translating the Weissman deal?" Victor froze. His head snapped up. "You can read German?" Aisha's eyes widened. "I didn't mean—" "You either answer the question, or you didn't. Can you read German?" Aisha hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Victor's lips curled into a smirk. He stood, the soft rustle of his tailored suit filling the silent office. "You? A maid's daughter reading German?" He chuckled darkly. "This I have to see." He strode to his desk, grabbed a thick German contract, and held it out to her. "Translate this for me. Right now, word for word. And if you manage to do it without errors," he leaned close, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper, "I'll give you my entire salary for this quarter. That's $15 million, little girl." Aisha's face flushed, but she didn't step back. "Fine," she said softly. "But if I succeed, you'll never speak to my mother like she's beneath you again." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Bold, but fine. You have 5 minutes." Victor reclined in his chair, his arms folded smugly. Aisha stepped forward, taking the paper with steady hands. She scanned the first paragraph, her lips moving silently as she processed the legal jargon. "This contract is entered into between Weissman Industries and Hayes Corporation for the mutual distribution of medical technologies across European markets." Victor's smirk faded slightly. "The parties agree to comply with EU regulations, with particular attention to Article 47 of the European Union Medical Device Regulation Act." Her pronunciation was flawless. Victor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he watched her continue, his amusement slipping into intrigue. In her mind, Aisha saw herself as a child in a sunlit Lagos library, curled up with a battered German dictionary. Her father, a linguistics professor, had spent hours teaching her and her brothers French, German, and Spanish before he died in a car accident. When her mother lost their home and was forced to take the maid job overseas, Aisha put her education on hold to help her mother survive. But she never stopped reading, never stopped learning. "Enough!" Victor barked suddenly, slamming his hand on the desk. Aisha stopped mid-sentence and looked up. "What's wrong?" she asked calmly. Victor stood, pacing. "This isn't possible. You're just some maid's daughter. Where did you learn this? You said translate it. You didn't ask how I know German." Victor stopped pacing and turned on her, his face a mixture of confusion and frustration. You've been cleaning toilets for the past 3 years while sitting on this skill? Aisha met his glare with quiet dignity. My mother needed me, so I stayed. Victor ran a hand through his hair. For the first time in years, he felt shaken. You're wasted here, Victor murmured, more to himself than to her. Aisha carefully placed the contract back on his desk. So? Do I get the $15 million? She asked, her voice steady but her heart pounding. Victor smirked again, but this time there was no malice in it. I'll have to check your translation. If it's perfect, he paused and muttered, we'll talk. As Aisha turned to leave, Victor called after her. Miss Carter, tomorrow morning, be in this office at 8 a.m. sharp. You and I have unfinished business. Aisha hesitated, then nodded. The door closed behind her, leaving Victor alone in the dimly lit office. He stared down at the contract and whispered to himself, Who are you, Aisha Carter? The morning sunlight poured through the Hayes mansion's vast windows, casting long golden streaks across the marble floor. Victor Hayes, the billionaire tycoon with a reputation for ruthlessness, stood at the edge of his private balcony, staring out over the city skyline. In his hand, he held a file, Aisha Carter's personnel record. 3 years as household staff. No prior education history. No employment history before that. No certifications. He scowled. How does a maid's daughter read German? Like a seasoned legal consultant. Mr. Hayes? His assistant's voice crackled through his earpiece. Your 8 o'clock is here. Victor set the file down and turned. Send her in. Aisha entered, dressed modestly in her uniform, clutching a small leather-bound notebook. Her eyes flickered briefly across the opulent study, but quickly settled on Victor. Good morning, Mr. Hayes, she said softly. Victor studied her for a long moment before speaking. You're not who you seem to be. Aisha raised an eyebrow. Is that why you call me here? Sit. Victor gestured to the chair opposite his desk. As she sat, he tossed the German contract in front of her. Your translation was flawless. I had it reviewed by a senior legal translator. Not a single error. Aisha remained silent. I don't like mysteries, Miss Carter, Victor continued, leaning forward. Where did you learn this? And don't give me that I just read a lot line. Aisha met his gaze evenly. Would it make a difference if I told you? Victor blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her calm defiance. Try me. Her mind drifted. 10 years ago, Lagos, her father, Professor Emmanuel Carter, had been the pride of the university, a linguistic scholar fluent in 6 languages. He used to say, language is power, Aisha. Master it, and no one can silence you. But then came the scandal. False accusations from jealous colleagues, a car accident that took his life, and her mother's desperate journey overseas to work as a maid. Aisha, once a prodigy, had abandoned her dream of becoming a translator to care for her younger siblings. When her mother fell ill, Aisha followed her to America, taking on the same work she swore she'd never do. You could have been anything, Victor said, breaking her reverie. And yet, you're polishing silverware in my house? My mother needed me, Aisha replied softly. Family comes before ambition. Victor frowned. The words felt foreign to him. Family before ambition. You threw away your future. Or maybe I redefined it, Aisha countered. For the first time in years, Victor couldn't summon a smug response. Instead, he changed tactics. You're wasted in housekeeping. Effective immediately. You'll assist me as a temporary translator. Aisha blinked. What? You heard me. Don't get used to it. This isn't charity. You'll be on probation. Fail me and you're back to scrubbing floors. Aisha's lips twitched. Do I get a raise? Victor smirked despite himself. Bold girl. Later that day, Victor entered the boardroom with Aisha trailing behind him. Heads turned. Who's the new assistant? One executive whispered. She's a maid. Must be Victor's latest project. Another sneered. Victor heard them but said nothing. Instead, he handed Aisha a stack of German documents. Translate these on the spot. The room fell silent as she began reading fluently, her voice calm and confident. By the end, Even the skeptics were staring. "Impressive," muttered Charles, Victor's younger brother and rival. But Victor noticed a cold glint in Charles's eye, a storm brewing. That evening, Aisha sat alone in the kitchen, scribbling in her notebook. Grace entered, her face pale. "Aisha, what are you doing?" "Working. Victor Hayes is dangerous. You stay in your lane, do you hear me?" "I'm not afraid of him, Mama," Aisha whispered. Maybe I can be more than this." Grace shook her head. "Don't make the same mistake I did, child." Meanwhile, Victor sat in his private office, staring at a glowing laptop screen. "Find me everything on Aisha Carter," he ordered his head of security. A few minutes later, a file popped up. As he scrolled through photos of her university debate competitions and language awards, something twisted in his chest. "What happened to you?" he wondered. The next morning, Victor found Aisha waiting in his office, poised and professional. "You're early," he said. "You said 8 sharp. It's 7:50. Victor smirked. Impressive. But as he moved to his desk, his phone buzzed with a message from Charles. "Your little pet project is about to blow up in your face. Watch your back, brother." Victor's smirk faded. Kindly like and subscribe to this channel. The mansion was quieter than usual that morning, the stillness hanging heavy in the air like an omen. Aisha adjusted her neat blazer. Victor had insisted she wear something more professional now that she was his temporary translator. Grace watched her from the kitchen doorway, worry etched deep into her face. "You look too comfortable," her mother whispered. "Victor Hayes doesn't give without expecting something in return." Aisha tucked a stray braid behind her ear. "Mama, I'm not naive, but this is my chance to step out of the shadows." Grace sighed. "Just be careful. That family doesn't care who they burn." Victor's younger brother, Charles Hayes, sat in his sleek corner office at Hayes Corporation, drumming his fingers against a glass desk. The photos of Aisha translating documents in yesterday's meeting were spread out before him. A maid turned translator. "How quaint," Charles sneered. "She embarrassed you, didn't she?" said Lauren, his assistant, leaning against the doorframe. Charles's jaw tightened. "She made Victor look like a genius in front of the board. I won't let her become another one of his weapons." "What's the plan?" "Find out what she's hiding. Everyone has skeletons. I'll make sure Victor regrets bringing her into this world." Victor strode into his private study, finding Aisha already at the desk, typing away as German and French documents lay open beside her. "You're early again," he said, tossing his suit jacket onto the couch. "You said, 'Time waits for no one,'" Aisha replied without looking up. Victor smirked faintly. "You listen well. That'll keep you alive in this house." Before Aisha could respond, the door burst open. "Victor!" Charles's voice boomed as he stepped inside without knocking. "Brother." Victor's tone was cool as ice. "To what do I owe this intrusion?" Charles's eyes flicked to Aisha. "So this is a prodigy, Maid. You caused quite the stir upstairs." "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Charles." "Oh, I'm not here for opinions." Charles smirked. "I came to warn you. Word is spreading about your little pet project. The board is wondering if you've lost focus. Or worse, your mind." Victor's jaw clenched. "Tell the board to mind their own affairs." Charles leaned in close. "Don't say I didn't warn you when she stabs you in the back." He left, but not before giving Aisha a long, calculating look. By noon, rumors had already begun circulating among mansion staff and corporate employees. "Victor's sleeping with the maid. He's making her his heir. She's blackmailing him." Aisha overheard the whispers as she passed through the hallway. "She thinks she's too good for housekeeping now," one maid sneered. "Bet she won't last a week," another muttered. Aisha kept her head high, but felt her stomach twist. That evening, Victor handed Aisha a set of critical documents. "Translate these and prepare a presentation by morning. No mistakes." "Yes, sir." She worked late into the night, meticulously translating each page. But when she saved the final file and turned off the laptop, she didn't notice the small flash drive plugged into the side. The next morning, Victor stormed into the study, his face thunderous. "Miss Carter, what did you do?" Aisha froze. What's wrong? The French deal. You sent in a version riddled with errors. The contract been voided. That's impossible. Aisha gasped. I checked it 3 times. Don't lie to me. Victor barked. My company just lost $12 million overnight. Aisha's hand shook. I didn't. Enough. Victor's voice dropped to a low growl. Leave. Now. She staggered back, her vision blurring with tears. As she left, she passed Charles in the hallway. He was smiling, alone in his study. Victor rubbed his temples. Was I wrong about her? But then he remembered the fear in her eyes, the sheer determination she showed in every word she translated. No, this isn't her style. He picked up the phone. Find out who accessed the translation files last night. I want surveillance footage from the study. In the mansion's servant quarters, Aisha sat on her narrow bed, tears streaking her face. Maybe Mama was right, she whispered. I don't belong in his world. But then she remembered her father's words. Language is power. Never let them take that from you. She clenched her fists. They want me to break, but I won't. That night, Victor reviewed the surveillance footage. There it was. Charles's assistant, Lauren, sneaks into the study after Aisha leaves, plugging in a flash drive. Victor's fist slammed onto the desk. Charles Hayes, he growled. You just declared war. The atmosphere in the Hayes mansion had shifted. No longer was it just a house of cold luxury and muted footsteps. It had become a battlefield. Victor Hayes stood at the head of his marble desk, fists planted firmly on its glossy surface. On the large screen behind him, security footage replayed. Charles's assistant, Lauren, creeping into the study, her fingers quick as she plugged in a flash drive. Victor's jaw tightened. So this wasn't her fault. She was set up. Charles, he murmured darkly, you've crossed the line. In the servants' quarters, Aisha sat quietly on her bed, staring at her callous hands. Her mother had tried to console her, but the shame in her chest was too heavy to lift. Maybe this is what I deserve for dreaming above my station, she thought. A knock on the door startled her. Who is it? She asked softly. The door opened, and there stood Victor Hayes, not in his usual tailored suit, but in a simple black cashmere sweater and slacks. Aisha, he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. She stood quickly. Sir, sit down. She hesitated, but obeyed. Victor walked in, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studying her. I accused you of incompetence, he finally said. I was wrong. Her eyes widened. What? I reviewed the footage. You were sabotaged. Aisha's hands trembled in her lap. Then you believe me? Victor knelt in front of her. His piercing gray eyes softened. Not only do I believe you, I intend to make them pay. Later that night, Victor called Aisha into his private study. The atmosphere was tense, but charged with a new sense of purpose. You're not just my translator anymore, Victor said. You're my partner in this fight. Together, we're going to take Charles down. Aisha blinked. Why are you doing this? I thought people like you don't take risks for the help. Victor smirked faintly. Maybe I'm not the man I thought I was. Aisha tilted her head. You're changing. And it's your fault, Victor admitted. You forced me to see the world differently. Now let's use that vision to destroy my brother's little power games. Over the next few days, Aisha and Victor worked tirelessly in secret. She translated critical foreign contracts to outmaneuver Charles's allies overseas. Victor used his connections to freeze accounts Charles had siphoned money into. Together, they pieced together evidence of Charles's embezzlement and corruption. Each night, they sat side by side in the mansion's study, paper spread across the desk, a faint glow from the lamp illuminating their determined faces. Victor took Aisha to her first corporate event, a high-stakes meeting with European investors. As they entered the sleek glass conference room, whispers rippled through the crowd. Is that the Maid? She's walking beside him like an equal. Charles was there too, his smirk venomous. Victor leaned close to Aisha and whispered, Show them what you can do. Aisha stepped forward, her voice calm and commanding as she delivered the entire opening presentation. flawlessly switching between English, French, and German. By the end, the investors were on their feet, applauding. Charles's smirk faltered. That night, Charles struck back. Aisha's mother, Grace, received an eviction notice for her small apartment in the city. Someone had also leaked Aisha's employment records to a local tabloid, framing her as Victor's mistress. Grace burst into tears. They're trying to ruin you, Aisha. Let's just leave. But before Aisha could answer, Victor arrived. No one is going anywhere, he said firmly. This is my fault. I let Charles get too bold. He turned to Grace. Pack your bags. Both of you are moving into the mansion under my protection. With Victor's security team stationed around the mansion, it became clear this was no longer just a family squabble. It was war. Late one evening, as Victor and Aisha sat in the study, he poured them both a glass of wine. You've been remarkable, he said softly. Aisha looked up, startled. You don't give compliments easily. Don't get used to it, Victor teased, though his voice was warm. There was a long pause. You remind me of my younger self, Victor admitted, fighting against the odds, refusing to bow down. Aisha smiled faintly. Except you've always had money and power. I've only had words. Words can be more dangerous than any weapon, Victor said. The next morning, Victor received a call from his lawyer. Sir, Charles just filed for an emergency board meeting. He's going to vote to strip you of CEO powers. Victor hung up and turned to Aisha. They're making their move. Aisha's eyes blazed. Then let's make ours. Victor smirked. That's my girl. Together, they strode out of the study, ready for battle. Kindly like and subscribe to this channel. The air in Hayes Mansion was thick with tension, like a storm brewing over calm waters. Aisha stood in the sunlit foyer, clutching her notebook against her chest, as if it could shield her from the chaos that was about to come crashing down. Victor Hayes had been pacing all morning, his usually calm and calculated demeanor fraying at the edges. He was preparing for war, not just for his company, but for her. Victor, you need to see this. It was Marcus, Victor's head of security, holding out a tablet. On the screen flashed a headline from a scandalous tabloid. Billionaire's maid turned mistress? Sources say Victor Hayes is buying her family's silence. Below was a photo of Aisha and her mother, Grace, stepping out of a modest grocery store, circled in red like criminals on a run. Victor's jaw tightened. Charles. At that exact moment, Grace burst into the room, clutching an eviction notice in her trembling hands. They froze my bank account, she sobbed. I can't pay the rent, Aisha. We're going to be thrown out on the street. Aisha's heart plummeted. Mama, I'll fix this. No, Victor cut in sharply, stepping forward. You won't lift a finger. Grace looked at him, startled. You're under my protection now, Victor said firmly. Anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me. That evening, Victor called an emergency meeting in his private study. Aisha, Grace, Marcus, and Victor's legal team sat around a massive oak table. Charles isn't satisfied with taking shots at me anymore, Victor said, his voice cold as steel. Now he's targeting innocent people. I'm not innocent, Aisha whispered. If I hadn't accepted your offer, Mama wouldn't be in this mess. Victor slammed his hand on the table. Don't ever say that again. Everyone fell silent. Victor's eyes softened slightly. I dragged you into my world, and I'll be damned if I let it destroy you. 2 days later, Charles struck again. Grace's former employer back home received an anonymous tip that she had stolen jewelry from Hayes Mansion, a complete fabrication. The embassy began investigating, threatening Grace with deportation. Victor stormed into Charles's office, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. You're finished playing games, brother. Charles didn't flinch. He leaned back in his leather chair, smirking. Your pet maid and her little family are liabilities. I'm just cleaning up your mess. Victor's fists clenched. Try to touch them again, and I'll bury you so deep even the board won't remember your name. That night, Aisha sat on her bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her phone vibrated with dozens of hateful messages from strangers. Gold-digging whore. Leave Victor Hayes alone. You'll never be more than the help. She tried to block them out, but the words stuck like thorns. I don't belong here, she whispered. Grace gripped her hand tightly. Don't you dare give up, Aisha. Not after everything you survived. Meanwhile, Victor was moving mountains. He paid off Grace's debts and arranged for a top immigration lawyer to stop her deportation. He called a press conference, standing before flashing cameras and declaring, "The rumors about my personal life are baseless, and anyone targeting Miss Carter or her family will face the full weight of Hayes Corporation's legal team." The media went wild. For the first time in her life, Aisha saw someone powerful, stand up for her in public. Days later, Victor handed Aisha a thick file. This is the Sato deal. It's our biggest contract yet. If we close it, I'll have the leverage to force Charles out for good. Aisha opened the file, scanning the Japanese documents. Her hands trembled. Victor, I've never worked with Japanese legal texts. What if I fail? Victor stepped closer, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then fail, and I'll still have your back. Aisha looked up, tears in her eyes. Why? Because you're not just my translator anymore, Victor said quietly. You're family. In Tokyo, Aisha stood before a room of stoic Japanese executives. Charles sat smugly in the corner, certain she'd choke. But as Aisha began to speak, in flawless Japanese, the room fell silent. Her confidence grew with every word, her father's voice echoing in her mind. Language is power. By the end of her presentation, the Sato executives were nodding and smiling. Victor leaned back in his chair, watching her with pride. As they boarded the plane back home, Victor's phone buzzed with a message. Congratulations on the Sato deal. Enjoy your little victory while you can. Charles. Victor's smile faded. It's not over yet, he murmured. Aisha turned to him. Then let's finish this. Together. Victor's gray eyes met hers. Together. Kindly like and subscribe for more stories like this. The boardroom of Hayes Corporation was a battlefield. The polished oak table stretched like a no man's land between Victor Hayes and his younger brother, Charles. Around them sat the company's board members, their eyes flicking between the two men like spectators at a gladiator match. Victor stood at the head of the table, calm but deadly, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate. At his side sat Aisha, dressed in a sleek navy dress Victor had insisted on buying for her. Her fingers clutched her notes tightly, knuckles white. Charles leaned back in his chair, smirking. This meeting is long overdue, Charles began smoothly. Hayes Corporation can no longer afford to be distracted by Victor's pet projects. I propose we vote to remove him as CEO effective immediately. Murmurs rippled around the room. Victor didn't flinch. He pressed a button on his tablet, and a projector hummed to life, filling the room with a massive spreadsheet. Before you vote, Victor said coldly, let's discuss this. On the screen appeared financial records. Charles's financial records. A year's worth of evidence showing how Charles funneled company funds into shell accounts, Victor explained. He's been bleeding Hayes Corporation dry to fund his personal investments. The board gasped. That's a lie. Charles roared, springing to his feet, fabricated by Victor and his little maid-turned-mistress. Victor's eyes flashed. Careful, brother. This maid just saved our company $1 billion contract in Japan. All eyes turned to Aisha. She stood slowly, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Mr. Hayes may call me a maid, she said, but that didn't stop me from translating and negotiating the Sato deal. Without it, Hayes Corporation would be bankrupt right now. She took a deep breath and met the board members' eyes one by one. I've been cleaning your floors and pouring your drinks for years. You never noticed me because you didn't think I mattered, but Victor did. He gave me a chance to prove that intelligence and loyalty aren't defined by status. A ripple of murmurs swept the room again, this time softer, contemplative. Charles slammed his fist on the table. Enough of this nonsense. She's manipulating you all. Victor has lost his edge, and now he's letting a servant girl ruin everything we built. Victor cut him off, his voice like ice. You built nothing, Charles. You've been leeching off this company for years, and now I've got the proof to end you." Victor tossed a folder onto the table. Inside were printed copies of Charles's transactions, signed confessions of his cronies, and even footage of Lauren planting the corrupted file in Aisha's computer. The chairman of the board cleared his throat. "Let's put it to a vote. All in favor of removing Victor Hayes as CEO." Only 2 hands raised, Charles and his lackey. All in favor of removing Charles Hayes from all positions of authority. Every other hand in the room shot up. Charles froze. "You can't do this to me," he shouted. "I'm your brother, Victor." Victor's jaw tightened. "You stopped being my brother the moment you went after her mother." Security guards entered. "Escort Mr. Hayes out," Victor ordered. As they dragged Charles away, he screamed, "This isn't over." But Victor didn't even blink. The boardroom emptied, leaving only Victor and Aisha. Victor sank into a chair, suddenly looking 10 years older. "It's done," he whispered. "You won," Aisha said softly. Victor shook his head. "We won." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, there was no trace of the cold, ruthless billionaire. Only a man who had been changed. "You spent your life cleaning up after people like me," Victor said. "It's time I do something for you." Aisha frowned. "What do you mean?" Victor reached into his pocket and handed her an envelope. She opened it slowly, her eyes widening. "This is a scholarship to the best linguistics program in the country," Victor said. "You're going back to school, Aisha. Full tuition, room and board covered." Tears welled in her eyes. "Victor, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it," he said softly. Aisha threw her arms around him, and for once, Victor didn't pull away. Weeks later, the Hayes mansion felt like a different place. Grace managed the household staff now, not as a maid, but as head of operations. Victor had begun working remotely. His ruthless edges softened. He laughed more, smiled more. And Aisha? She spent her mornings in online classes and her afternoons working on a book about her journey, tentatively titled Words That Saved Me. One sunny afternoon, Victor and Aisha sat across from each other in the mansion's garden, a chessboard between them. "You're going to lose," Aisha teased, moving her queen. Victor raised an eyebrow. "I taught you this game, and I surpassed you." She smirked. Victor chuckled, a sound that surprised even him. "You're dangerous, Miss Carter." "Checkmate," she said softly, her eyes locked on his. Victor leaned back in his chair, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "You've won again." This time, they both knew he wasn't just talking about the game. The lecture hall fell silent as Aisha Carter closed her notebook and looked out over the sea of eager faces. And that, students, is why language isn't just communication. It's a connection, it's power, and sometimes it's survival. A ripple of applause echoed through the room. Aisha smiled. She still wasn't used to standing on stages, commanding the room instead of scrubbing its floors. For years had passed since the days of the Hayes Mansion, the corporate wars, and the cold billionaire who had cracked open her world. Now she was Professor Carter, a renowned linguist, published author, and speaker at international conferences. She built the life she once thought impossible. And yet, as she walked out into the crisp autumn air, her phone buzzed in her bag. Victor Hayes, incoming call. Her heart skipped. She hadn't spoken to Victor in over a year. Aisha, his deep voice said on the other end. "Victor." She kept her tone neutral, but her pulse quickened. "I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important." "What happened?" There was a pause and a sigh. "Hayes Corporation is on the brink. A hostile foreign takeover. We need someone who understands both the languages and the cultures of the players involved. You're the best in the field now." Aisha gripped her phone tighter. "Victor, I don't do corporate politics anymore. I'm not asking you to." His voice softened. "I'm asking you to save lives. Thousands of employees could lose everything if this deal goes through." "I'm not the same girl you plucked from your servants' quarters," she said quietly. "And I'm not the same man who put you there," he replied. "Please, Aisha, just meet with me. 1 hour. That's all I ask." 2 days later, Aisha stepped into a sleek glass skyscraper. Victor was waiting for her in the boardroom, older but no less commanding. His gray eyes softened as he took her in. "You've done well for yourself," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Because of you," she admitted. They sat across from each other, the weight of old memories hanging between them. "I'll be honest, Victor," Aisha began. "I built this life to get away from the chaos of yours. Why should I step back into that fire?" "Because you care," he said simply. "Because no one else can do what you do. And because—" he hesitated. Because I trust you more than anyone else in this world." That night, Aisha sat in her apartment, staring at the city lights. She had worked so hard to build her independence, to step out of Victor's shadow. But she couldn't deny it. She missed him. She missed the fire in her veins when they worked side by side. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Language is power. Use it to change the world." What kind of woman would I be if I turned my back now? The next morning, Aisha walked into Hayes Corporation, a translator's badge clipped to her blazer. Victor turned as she entered. For the first time in years, she saw him smile. Not the cold smirk of a billionaire, but the warm, genuine smile of a man who'd been waiting for her. "You came back," he said softly. "I didn't come back for you, Victor," she teased. "I came back for challenge." "Fair enough." He handed her a thick folder of documents. "Shall we get to work?" Aisha took the folder, her fingers brushing his. "Let's finish what we started." Months later, the two of them stood in the newly renovated Hayes headquarters. The company had been saved. Aisha turned to Victor. "This is the last time, you know. After this, I'm going back to my quiet academic life." Victor smirked. "We'll see." As they stepped into the elevator, he leaned slightly closer. "You changed me, Aisha." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "And you taught me to never settle." The elevator doors closed. Thank you for watching. Kindly like and subscribe to this channel.